If you are a writer or you want to become a writer of any consistency or magnitude, you want to create books that are consistently great, or maybe just write a single book, in all of those cases, it really helps to write consistently fast. For me, I'm able to write 5,000 words, 4,000, 3,000 words a day pretty easily through dictation and some other methods, which I learned from the man who I got to interview in today's episode. His name is Chris Fox. You might know him or have heard of him from some of your buddies telling you should learn to write faster because it may just improve the quality of your writing and allow you to just have more freedom when it comes to a career in authorship full-time or anything down the writing lane. You might recognize him from writing any of these lovely books here. 5,000 words per hour is probably the one that put him on the map the most. And while 5,000 words per hour really is an edge case, he even explains that in the interview. This book, tiny little thing. He writes very practically in his books, very short little things that teach you with examples and with essentially worksheets on what exactly to do to achieve those word counts. It does teach you how to write very consistently and write high quality words and a great magnitude of words per day, which I really appreciate. One of his books, The Lifelong Writing Habit, is one of the books that really informed the way I look at a long-term career in the author industry. So I hope you will enjoy this episode of the Zero to Hero Author Podcast, the podcast where we interview authors, talking with them about the things that they wish they could do again, the things that perhaps they did wrong, but also the things that they did incredibly right. And from there, we want to take us as lower authors, following along my own path as a lower author, and rise us up to hero authors, so from zero to hero. That's why the podcast is called Zero to Hero Author Podcast. So if that sounds interesting to you, I recommend you stick around. So take it away past me. All right, so for listeners, I know a lot of my audience might not know that much about you, and that's down on them because your content has been kind of incredible, especially in the speed writing space. Could you just give us kind of a glimpse of who you are, both as a storyteller and as a teacher of storytelling?
Sure. I'm an old man. I've been doing this for quite some time. My first novel came out back in 2014. Did pretty well. It's called No Such Thing as Werewolves. It's what today would be called an archaeological thriller. I've written a lot of science fiction and fantasy series over the years. But the book that gets me invited on podcasts like this came out in 2015. It was called 5,000 Words Per Hour. At the time, I was an iPhone engineer. I even made an app for it. The books are extraordinarily short. They're like 12,000 words each, which I did intentionally. But what the books do that most others don't is I put exercises there, and that proved to be the game changer. So there's like 8 books in the series, I think. Over the next several years, from 2015 through probably 2018 or 2019, I just kept releasing the books in this series. And if you were coming in to be an author and didn't really know how to do it professionally, books like Right to Market, Six Figure Author, they taught you how to do that. If you didn't know how to write a book, I wrote a book called Plot Gardening. I basically tried to give you all the tools you would need as cheaply as I could to do what we do for a living.
Yeah, and I love how you've kind of advocated for shorter instructional books because, as good as Stephen King might be, I would not want to struggle through one of his writing books. But so, your big one has been 5,000 words an hour, which was kind of, I would say, is the book that got me into dictating, but also the book that got me into thinking about writing in a way that is like other industries productively, not just as a kind of whimsical thing, but it is still formulaic, setting up your terrarium and whatnot. But why would you say it is actually important for writers to be putting out books fast and putting those out with high levels of quality? Why would we want to write fast as authors?
Amazon is the top 3 largest bookstores in the world. So it's got ebooks, which is the very largest. Then right behind that, it has Kindle Unlimited, which is the second largest. And then right behind that, it has Audible, which is the third largest. So if you want to sell books, you need to feed Amazon. And Amazon's algorithm is time-based, meaning the longer it has been since you put out a product, the harder it is going to be for you to make sales on that. And that's less true on Audible. It's a little easier to put audiobooks and have them sell years after the fact. But for ebooks, if you're not putting out a book like every single month, then you're not making a living doing this. And that is why it's so important for you to write, edit, and finish stories really quickly. We don't have a choice. What is it? Today is Thursday, October 9th. I just finished up book 4 today, as a matter of fact, in my current series. Book 1 was published in August, so August, September, October, book 3 just came out. November, book 4 will come out. It's every single month. It just keeps going because you got to get that paycheck as an author.
Yeah, well, congratulations on book 4. Now, the audience might be a little bit terrified by the prospect of, putting out a book every single month, but also probably awestruck because it is possible to do that with a high level of quality. Really quickly, this is not one of my registered questions, but what is your how many drafts do you do before publication? What does that look like for you?
These days, I actually have a video coming out on this tomorrow about self-editing. These days, I do really 3 passes on the book myself, and then beta readers will read it before I get my last pass, and my wife, my editor, will read it as well. So I get to see it 3 times, and I have a couple other layers of defense to sort of modify the book. But I would argue I don't really take things away anymore. It's really rare for me to do so. But I add a lot of stuff in on the drafts. So I'll write a first draft, then maybe I'll add 5,000 words to the next draft to the manuscript and flesh out some parts where I didn't give it enough description. But it happens all very, very quickly. So 2 weeks to write a book and then like 3 or 4 days to edit it.
That is incredible. And coming this next month, how many books will that be out in the world?
Man, that is really sad that I don't know the answer to that question. I would guess 75, somewhere in that neighborhood, but I stopped counting.
That is incredible, inspirational. So in 5,000 words per hour, you talk a little bit about your process to get into flow state. Do you mind if we talk about a little bit about flow state?
No, I love talking about it.
Yeah. So you talk a little bit about your process for getting into flow state, but what does that really look like for you? Is that like a habit, a ritual that you do, or what does that look like for you?
It is. It's a series of interlocking rituals, but John Cleese has the best creativity explanation I've ever seen. What he suggests is that you erect what he calls a tortoise enclosure, but really you could call a sanctuary. It's a place where you have boundaries of space, as he would have said, and boundaries of time, where you're like, okay, from 7:30 until 8:30, I get to write and play and figure stuff out, and then an alarm's going to go off. So your mind knows, oh, I have the freedom to be creative. I don't have to worry about in 42 minutes I need to be at work, and I've got to do this, and I've got to make this phone call, and I have to pay this bill. You push all that stuff away and create a sanctuary. And once I've done that, I gamify it in terms of time. So I do writing sprints where I don't use a timer anymore. I don't need it. But when I first started, I'd set a timer for 20 minutes. The timer starts, you start writing. You're not allowed to stop. You're not allowed to go back and edit. You just put words on the page for 20 minutes. And it just astounded me how quickly I was able to make progress doing that after staring at the same blank cursor for, months at a time.
Yeah. Do you dictate nowadays, or are you still typing?
I'm still typing. I went through a phase where I was dictating quite a lot, but that was when I still had a day job as a software engineer. So I would stand at a bus stop and dictate to myself. Now that I have as much time as I need, I enjoy typing more, but it's not as fast, but I definitely find it more enjoyable, so I stick to that.
Yeah. As a bit of a side note, do you mind telling that story of how you kind of started writing, on the bus, in those scraps of time throughout your day? Because I know a lot of my viewers are pressed for time. When can I write? And I think your story really disproves, you can write. It's just, having that discipline and regimen to do it.
You definitely got to get creative. So the bus was actually the second phase. My writing career really started. I worked at a company called Redwood Credit Union, and my job was, if you called in to check on your account balance, to transfer some money, I was the guy that answered the phone. And so I would have little chunks of time that were about 2 minutes, never more than 5, but usually about 2 minutes. And I would have an email open where it looked like I was typing an email to somebody, but really I'm writing my manuscript in that email. And I would put down a couple thousand words a day just by writing a sentence or two. And then the phone would ring. I would take a phone call, have to go back to, I call them micro sprints. And I got down as many words as I can a day. And after I left that job and became a software engineer, I had to take the bus down to San Francisco. There for an hour at a time. So now no one's interrupting me. I could just sit in a bus seat with a laptop and crank out words. And I would do that every single day when I was going to my day job. I'd write at my lunch as well. So at lunch and before and after work on the bus, I was cranking out words. And that's how I got to as close to 5,000 words per hour as I could get. I don't write that fast anymore. I would say I average probably 3,000 to 3,500 words an hour. But I was obsessed with speed because I didn't have enough time, like so many people out there. It's like if you've got 45 minutes and bits and pieces in your day, how can you use that to make a novel? And I was determined to find a way, even if I could only do 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there. And, if you find a way, you will start cranking out books. And the more you do it, it's just like a muscle, the faster you get.
Yeah. With that, did you ever struggle with the internal editor where you're trying to refined the words you're putting out while you're writing them, or were you always very focused on simply putting the words down? And how did you learn to do that?
The first 15 years of my career were exactly that, and eventually I kind of quit writing as a result. I was too much of a realist and not as much of an optimist. I had to learn to turn that phase of my brain off, and how I trick my brain into doing that is I tell it, okay, there's going to be multiple phases of writing. This is the put the words down phase. Later on will come the edit and judge the word phase. So I don't have to do that now. I know it's going to get done later. And over time, your conscious brain and then eventually your subconscious sort of accepts that. It's like, okay, we're not judging these words because later on we're going to get a chance to go back and fix anything we possibly need to fix and take as much time doing that as we want. Right now, it's just kind of a race to get the story down, and your subconscious will very quickly fall into line if you do that for, let's say, a month or two.
In your book Plot Gardening, which we can talk about a little bit in a sec here, you talk a lot about stories and the ways that, and you clearly have a really, really great understanding of narrative. You have to have that really to some degree, even if you're putting out books quickly to really excel. But for you, I understand that it can be kind of hard to write quickly while also balancing the narrative in your head. What does that look like for you, where it's quality of story and narrative generally, but also putting it out quickly, where every writing session or every day is, going through another chapter that can progress very quickly. And I know myself and my audience can really lose touch with the story. So how do you balance remembering narrative and plotting that out with going through it quickly?
Writing's both an art and a craft, so you kind of need both. You asked earlier about flow. That's flow state. When you were in flow state, you were putting words down. There's no you, there's only the story. The words are pouring out of somewhere or something, and they're the best words that you're capable of creating. So that's the art part of it. The craft part of it is you need to learn to write better words, and you need to understand story structure. So I spent probably 10 or 15 years writing without understanding there was story structure. And once you know it exists and you study them all, the snowflake method, the 3-act structure, you pick your poison, the hero's journey, there's a whole bunch of different options you can choose. But if you have a structure, when you are writing, you'll subconsciously know, I need to adhere to that structure, so I'm going to need some scenes that are like this. So I do a little plotting ahead of time, which goes a long way. I allow myself freedom when I'm writing to deviate. If I have a good idea or all of a sudden something different is going to happen, that's fine. But I always have an idea when I start writing of what I'm going to write. So you should have an idea written down, and segregating your plotting process from your writing process will do that. So if you sit down and even just write a half a paragraph, 2 sentences, about what the chapter is going to be about, and you put a placeholder for every chapter in your book, when you sit down to write them, it's going to be way easier to figure out, okay, this is what comes next, and just keep going.
Yeah. Going back to the plot gardening, like you outline, even if it's not very, essays upon essays with every chapter, but it seems that with your book Plot Gardening, you really set up that story within like the past year or so, where it's you're guiding that idea in a way that is very strategic. Do you mind breaking that down a little bit for us? When
you say the plot, making the plot strategically, matching tropes and genre, is that what I'm understanding? Oh, sure.
Yes, yeah.
So what you're talking about is what I would call writing to market. Writing to market is simply understanding what your market is interested in. So my current series is archaeological thrillers, because that's what I personally am interested in. When we discovered Göbekli Tepe and realized, man, this is 10,000 years older than anything else we found, and then we found a 500,000-year-old worked wood to show that there was a wooden foundation of a structure 500,000 years ago before Homo sapiens existed. And we just keep finding all these crazy mysteries. A whole bunch of people all over the globe have said, there's got to be missing history. There's got to be missing civilizations that existed before ours, and we all want to know more about them. So for me, understanding the market, I have to understand, what do those people want to read? If you were excited when the scans of the area beneath the Khafre's pyramid came out, what do you want to read in a book? And so I analyzed the market, I looked at what these people were interested in, and when I cooked up the plot, I made sure, A, it fits my theories of what could have existed, and B, that it's fun and engaging and adventurous in the way that the genre is going to dictate. And if you're not familiar with archaeological thrillers, pretty much everybody has seen at least one Indiana Jones movie, that. So you need to present that and show the archaeology and show them solving mysteries and climbing through ruins and realizing things about the ancient past. And if you're doing that well, your audience is happy. And that's something we have to do as authors. You have to understand, this is what my audience is into. If you love epic fantasy and you've read thousands of epic fantasy books, you're going to do that without thinking, because you are your own reader. But if you're writing in a genre you don't know as well, then it definitely behooves you to study it and to kind of aim for what the genre tropes and conventions are.
Yeah. So now if you're listening to this, he basically just broke down a little bit of a summary of what he goes over in Right to Market, as well as a tiny bit of Plot Garter. But do you mind breaking down like the steps that you do, looking at Amazon, looking at subgenres to kind of figure out what your niche should be in your topic for marketing that?
Absolutely. I went to Amazon's main page, which obviously has changed a lot over the years, but there's always some version of this. You go there, you find the Kindle books, you look for the genres, you find the genre you want to read. It's going to present you with a bunch of subgenres, and then just like a reader would, you click on that, and you're going to see that there's a place where there's a bestsellers list and there's a new releases list. And tons and tons of fans all over the world can click on those two lists. So what you're trying to do is end up on those lists. And all we're doing is pattern recognition, almost like an AI would do, where you're scanning through the top 100 new releases, you're scanning through the top 100 best-selling books, rather, and coming to conclusions and finding patterns. I'm looking at science fiction, and they all have pictures of like various spaceships on them. Oh, I'm looking at fantasy, and I see a whole bunch of dragons. Whatever the symbols that are being utilized on those covers are going to become clear to you. And if you read the blurbs for these books, so click on books that you yourself might want to read and then read what they're about, you're going to learn more about the genre. But ultimately what you have to do is buy some of those books that you think look good, that you'd like to write something similar, and then read them. And that will tell you, based on the stuff that's really popular, what fans of the genre expect.
And you start with a topic that you're automatically interested in, like for you, say that genre of thrillers, or do you try to interest yourself in that genre, which might sell better, or is it always kind of what I'm interested in is also correlating with what the reader's interested in?
I tried both, and what I found out is a career over the long term, you can really only do the route of I pick the stuff I'm interested in. So I do try to pick stuff that's popular that I'm interested in, but that I haven't always done that, and sometimes I pick the wrong genre, and generally I'm happier than if I was writing the wrong genre and making more money. So military science fiction, I enjoyed it, but it was not something I wanted to stick around and write a lot more of. And I felt compelled to do so because it was just minting money. So like every time I put on a book, I'd make a ton of money, and I stuck around in that genre longer than I wanted to, and was, encouraged to stay around even longer than that just because of the money and the writing to market aspect. I think a mix is best. You are going to have kind of a portfolio over time in your backlist of various series that you create. If you mix in some that are things that you absolutely love to write, while others are things that are written to market, then you're going to get enough of a balance that you can have a career at this.
Yeah, and that's another benefit of writing fast as well, developing that backlist and using the next book to really sell those titles. This is a little bit deeper into the niche of managing Amazon and the rapid release strategy, but how do you think your process and the rapid release process in general is going to have to shift and change with the age of AI? How are human authors going to cope with millions of people putting out AI generated, not necessarily slop, but products that aren't as good as human writers when there are authors trying to do this?
There are good news and bad news, I guess, in that area. The first is that this has always been the case because, yes, AI does churn out more of that content. But if you go back to 2014, people were already giving up in Kindle because they remember the golden days of 2012, and now all of a sudden you had a lot more authors. There's always going to be more authors. There's always going to be more books. There's always going to be more competition. You have to do it better than everybody else. So you've got to do it better than the AI. You have to release higher content quality than AI can produce. You have to do your tie-ins more intelligently. You have to do your covers more intelligently. You have to do your marketing more intelligently. Eventually, AI might get to a point where it can duplicate that stuff. But for now, the things that AI produces, it can't market them like we can market it. It might be able to write something that's good enough that readers will read it, but you are still going to be able to have an edge in doing a better cover, doing a better blurb, doing better marketing placement, running better advertising. I despair of the day when in 15 years that's no longer true, but at least for now, you can certainly outfox AI. It's just a little bit more competition than used to exist. And that's true of any mature genre, and our industry is now very mature.
I love that. Well, you've proven speed really doesn't have to mean burnout, and for that I think I myself and the writing industry is infinitely grateful. For you've talked a little bit about this. How do you keep the writing process joyful after so many books? How do you really stay engaged with this as a career, with this as a a way of life?
I think you make some choices in the beginning as to what you are after exactly. In my case, I chose career and trying to make as much money as humanly possible, and that was a mistake. I burnt out on writing with Shattered Gods. I did an audio contract, and the audio contract stipulated I had to release a book every 4 months, and the books were averaging like 185 to 270,000 words. So, like, I see Brandon Sanderson's series on the shelf behind you, that sized. And I had to have one of those out every 4 months. And I think by the time I released book 4, I was so burnt out and so exhausted I didn't want to keep going. But obviously, you've got to finish the series. So I didn't allow myself enough time to write. I pushed myself too hard and I burnt out. If you want to sustain yourself long term, figure out what a good pace is and stick to that. And maybe that's every 4 months you can write a book. Maybe that's every 3 months you can write a book. Whatever your speed is, stick to that and don't feel like you can only have a career if you go faster. Just focus on quality and double down on that. So if you only write one series a year and it's an amazing series, you're probably still going to make some money. You know, Dungeon Crawler Carl is what, like, I don't know, 6 books now? And that's all he really needs to have for his career. They're just that good.
Yeah, lit RPGs really taken the industry by storm. Do you think you'll ever maybe write a lit RPG, or is it not really that interesting to you?
It's not really that interesting. For me, the problem is it's a bit like asking like an NBA star to write books about basketball, where my whole life is gaming. And I've played every video game for like since before you were born and by probably a couple decades before you were born. And reading a book where they're just narrating the video games I've played, I mean, it's funny at parts and I think it's enjoyable, but I just don't like the up comes the screen and then I level up and I have to choose these abilities because I could just go play a game and do that. And I don't know, it doesn't grab me the same way. And I have to love to write something to really put it out. So I wish I could write lit RPG. It's enormously successful. It's super easy to put out a good book and make a ton of money because the fans are voracious, and I just can't make myself write it. But the good news is I did find something that's close enough that most fans of lit RPG seem to like, and that's humorous fantasy. So I have a book called The Dark Lord Bert. I'm writing more stuff like that, and I think it'll do pretty well.
I love that. How many years has it been since you started writing?
I started writing when I was 6, so 43 years.
And that right there is encouragement too. Yeah. Well, what would your closing words be to all these writers who are starting out, maybe just now trying to join the bandwagon, which is kind of like the perfect audience for all of the how to write books that you've put out. And if you are starting to write, I would encourage you to check those out because they are, especially the Lifelong Writer is some of the best resources out there for learning how to write and how to start writing. But what would your advice be to a writer who wants to keep going for the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years, or maybe even reach your level?
Keep your career tight to your chest. Don't tell too many people about it. Unless your friends that you're telling are optimists. If you have friends that are pessimists, if you have friends that are realists, don't tell them about your dream. They're going to try to crush it. And what we're asking to do, becoming a famous author, is basically winning the lottery. It's like you're asking to become a rock star. It's kind of a tall order. So if you want that, pour everything you have into getting it, and you will eventually find the level of success you're after. I saw so many people who release 10, 20, 30 books. Nothing's working. They're barely making money. They're thinking about quitting. And then one day they release that series. There's just boom, it takes off. And the next thing you know, they're the hot new thing. So keep after it and ask yourself, in 10 or 15 years, do you want to be the person who stuck with your dream and wrote a bunch of books and tried? Or do you want to be the person who gave up and watched Netflix?
Thank you so much for joining us. But where can viewers find out more about you, your books, and really keep in touch with all that you're doing there?
Sure. My website is chrisfoxwrites.com. There's a tab for books. You can see everything I've released, or you can find it on Audible or Amazon. I've got nonfiction for authors, a whole bunch of sci-fi and fantasy, and most of my stuff is in bundles now. So if you want something inexpensive, especially on Audible, you can get like 94 hours for a credit of like the Magitech Chronicles. I appreciate the support, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.